The fork hit the floor before the applause had a chance to start. A soft clink that broke the air like a crack in glass. That was the exact moment everything changed. I was still holding my champagne flute, the stem cool and slick against my fingers, watching the secretary step onto the little stage they'd set up beside the dance floor. The MC's voice buzzed faintly through the mic, softened by velvet curtains and carpet. He had that practiced smile of someone who'd been told to sound heartfelt, even if the words weren't his own. "Let's hear it for the woman who kept the gears turning for 25 years, he said. People chuckled politely, polite southern laughter that sounded like clinking ice in glasses. My husband, Harold, smiled at the floor like he always did when someone praised him too close to the truth. His fingers drummed once against his napkin, then stopped when he realized people were watching. The secretary, Dana, held a small velvet box in both hands like it was a newborn. Her wine-red cocktail dress shimmered under the chandelier's amber light, sequins catching each turn of her wrist. It was sleeveless, too sparkly, a little too young. Not that anyone dared say it aloud. The room was full of Reachery's golf buddies, wives in pastel blazers. Nobody wanted to be the one to name what everyone else was thinking. The chandelier light turned her hair gold, and for one split second, I was proud. Because that woman up there had practically run Harold's office. She'd stayed late, scheduled flights, remembered birthdays, the kind of loyalty you didn't see much anymore. And for a brief, stupid second, I thought she was giving him something simple, a symbol of gratitude. My name is Lorraine. I'm 58 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Harold leaned forward in his chair as Dana opened the box. The orchestra had paused, bows hovering midair. Even the catering staff froze behind the long, white table of sliders and stuffed mushrooms. The champagne fountain in the corner gurgled quietly, but even its rhythm seemed to slow. Inside the box was a watch. It gleamed like it had just been kissed by moonlight. A vintage silver Rolex with a soft gray leather strap resting on a cushion of dark velvet. The kind of thing a man like Harold would appreciate. Elegant, understated, expensive enough to make a point without shouting it. Dana turned it slowly, like a magician revealing the final card. The back caught the light, and that's when the room froze. Neatly engraved, elegant and cruel were 3 words I never expected to see again. Property of Lorraine. There was a single beat of silence, then a whisper. Then the sound of someone's fork falling to the floor. That delicate metallic ring felt louder than the band ever could. I looked at Harold. His face didn't move. His hands stayed folded on the tablecloth, perfectly still. But I saw the jump in his throat. One quick swallow that gave him away. Dana laughed a little too quickly, a high, nervous sound that didn't belong to the room. It's just a joke, obviously, she said, flashing that bright, practiced grin. Lorraine, we thought you'd get a kick out of it. Someone chuckled from a nearby table, the kind of uncomfortable noise people make when they're not sure which side to take. Someone else cleared their throat. The tension rolled across the tables like a slow wave, but I just stared at the engraving. I knew that font. It was the same one we'd used for our wedding napkins. Delicate script with curled ends, the kind you could almost feel in your fingertips. I'd chosen it myself, insisting it looked timeless. The words shimmered beneath the lights. Property of Lorraine. Not from Lorraine. Not with love. Property. It wasn't a joke. It was a message. A private message, but not meant for me. I folded my napkin slowly, pressing the crease so it looked deliberate. My hands were steady, even though my pulse wasn't. The watch still sat in the open box. Dana was smiling like nothing had happened, her teeth too white, her cheeks too pink. Harold stared at it like it had grown fangs. The orchestra tried to start again. The first violin hit a note too sharp. The melody stumbled, then recovered, but the air didn't. The music sounded brittle, like something fragile pretending to be whole. My palms were damp. I reached for my water glass and almost tipped it over. The condensation left a pale ring on the white cloth, an accidental halo between us. Dana's smile twitched. Her eyes flicked to mine. Quick, nervous, then defiant. She knew. She knew I'd seen it, understood it, decoded what no one else in that room could have. Not just the words, but the smirk behind them. I excused myself quietly. No scene, no gasps, just a small nod and the scrape of my chair against the carpet. The hallway beyond the double doors swallowed the sound behind me. Out there, the world was cooler, dimmer. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like relief. The corridor smelled like floral carpet cleaner and overbrewed coffee, the kind that lingers in hotel urns at conference breakfasts. Old carpet underfoot, a faint stickiness near the vending machine. I stood under a wall sconce, the light soft and yellow against the patterned wallpaper, took out my phone and caught my reflection in the black screen. My lipstick was still perfect. My marriage wasn't. For a moment, I just breathed, listened. Behind the double doors, I could still hear the muffled echo of laughter, applause returning to life like nothing had happened. They were probably cutting the cake now, toasting Harold's legacy. Dana would be there beside him, one hand on his shoulder, eyes glossy with mock sentiment. 25 years of work, she'd said. 25 years of secrets, I thought. That watch wasn't a tribute, it was a trophy. And somehow, I was the punchline. I slid my phone into my clutch, pressed my fingertips against my temples. The hallway clock ticked softly. A different kind of watch, indifferent to humiliation. Through the small glass window in the doors, I saw them. Blurred shapes, golden light, clinking glasses. Harold's profile turned toward Dana, a tight smile glued in place. She leaned in, said something that made him laugh. His shoulders loosened. He was performing. So was I. For 27 years, I'd played the good wife. I'd smiled at company parties, sent holiday cards to his colleagues, laughed at his recycled stories. I knew the rhythm of his charm, when it was real, when it was armor. Tonight, it was both. I walked farther down the corridor, heels muffled by the carpet. A mirror hung at the end, tall, gold-framed, warped slightly at the edges. I looked taller in it, thinner, unreal. My reflection felt like a stranger wearing my dress. Somewhere inside the hall, a new toast began. I heard Harold's name followed by applause. The secretary's laugh rose above it, high, clean, sharp enough to draw blood. I pressed a hand to the mirror, cold glass. My wedding ring glinted beneath the sconce. For years, I'd worn it like proof of something permanent. Now it just looked like an antique, something polished, hollow, displayed out of habit. I should have gone back in. That's what polite wives do. Pretend, smile. Wait for the ride home to unravel quietly. But I stayed, because beneath the hurt was something steadier, a strange, calm kind of clarity, the kind that comes when the lie finally speaks for itself. I took a slow breath, straightened my shoulders, and fixed my lipstick one last time. When I finally returned to the banquet hall, the crowd had shifted. People were dancing now, tipsy and loud, the earlier tension dissolved under wine and brass instruments. Harold stood near the cake table, his jacket off, tie loosened. Dana hovered close, pretending to adjust the mic stand. Their proximity made my stomach turn. I caught sight of the watch on Harold's wrist. He'd put it on. Of course he had. He was always good at pretending not to understand the symbolism in front of him. When he noticed me, his smile faltered, only slightly. "Lorraine," he said, voice low. "You disappeared." "Just needed a moment," I replied. He nodded, the way guilty men nod when they hope a woman won't push further. Dana turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, Lorraine, I hope you're not upset. It was meant to be funny. Harold said you had such a good sense of humor." Her tone was airy, deliberate. I tilted my head, smiled the way women do when they decide to be underestimated. "Oh, I do," I said softly. "Sometimes it just takes me a minute to get the joke." She blinked, then laughed again, too loud. The conversation moved on, or at least they thought it did, but every time that watch caught the light, I could feel the weight of it against my chest. The gleam, the engraving, the unspoken message. By the time dessert was served, my plan had already started to form. Not revenge yet, not quite, just a need to know, to understand how deep it went, how long they'd been rehearsing this little performance. As I sat there, pretending to listen to the speeches, I realized something simple and devastating. They hadn't just embarrassed me, they'd declared something in front of everyone. Ownership, mockery, power, and that kind of message doesn't go unanswered. So while Harold laughed and Dana toasted, I memorized every gesture, every shared glance. The small details most people miss when they're too polite to look. Later, when we drove home, he would try to talk, pretend confusion, deflect. But that could wait. Tonight, all I needed was this. The proof, the clarity, the beginning. Because the moment the fork hit the floor, everything I'd believed about us shattered. And in the shards, I finally saw the reflection of the woman I'd become. Not a wife, not a victim, something sharper, something patient, something waiting. The hallway was too quiet. Just the faint drone of the AC and the low murmur of voices seeping through the banquet doors. Even that hum had rhythm, the kind that keeps time when you're trying not to fall apart. I stared at my phone for a long time before unlocking it, not to text anyone, not to scroll, just to light up my hands. They were shaking. The kind of tremor that doesn't come from fear, but from truth starting to unspool. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Slow and surgical. Right then, I was trying to make sense of the math. What kind of man lets his secretary engrave a retirement gift with his wife's name and doesn't flinch? What kind of woman does it? And smiles like she's proud. My reflection ghosted in the black screen. A tired woman with steady eyes and a mouth pressed too tight. I scrolled to my bank app, not because I expected to find anything right away, just because tapping and swiping gave my hands a job while my mind spun. The soft glow of the phone screen lit the fine lines on my palms, and for a second, I caught myself thinking, these hands built a home, a life, an image, and he spent it like small change. Then I saw it. Last week, a $2,000 charge at Oak and Hearth Fine Jewelry, not from my card, from our joint savings, and not by me. I froze. The transaction memo said, our gift, Rush Engrave, $2,000, Rush Engrave. The words pulsed under my thumb like a heartbeat. I tapped to expand. The store address appeared. Local, familiar. The same one Harold had bought me earrings from 3 Christmases ago. I remembered the bright glass counters, the way the clerk had complimented him on his taste while he typed an email instead of looking at me. That Christmas, the box had been left unwrapped. He'd handed it to me while balancing his laptop on the kitchen counter, eyes flicking between me and the blinking cursor on his work screen. And that same night, I'd heard the soft chime of a text. 9:46 p.m. Dana. He'd told me it was about a shipment delay, and I'd believed him, because back then, I still thought exhaustion was the price of love. I swiped back through old statements. There they were. Small charges, Oak and Hearth, boutique sums that looked innocent in isolation. $187.64, $289.50, $315.20. But together they drew a pattern. Hidden between grocery runs and gas stations. Always me's, always hers. The breath in my chest went shallow. The air in that corridor felt thick, humid, recycled, like I was breathing through wet cloth, the kind that sticks to your throat and won't let go. I straightened, heels clicking against the carpet as I turned toward the sound of laughter leaking from the banquet doors. I wasn't going back to smile. I was going back to see. The double doors gave a soft groan when I pushed them open. Music was back. A swing tune now, all brass and cheer. The kind of sound that made it easy to lie with your body while your heart was elsewhere. I scanned the room. Dana was near the dessert table, laughing too brightly at something one of Harold's old project managers had said. Her lipstick had worn off in the middle, leaving a pink outline that made her look almost human. Then her eyes met mine, and for the briefest second she froze, that small flicker of panic that betrays guilt before the smile catches up. I didn't stop walking. Straight past her, to the gift table. The velvet box sat there closed now, gleaming under the chandelier like a secret half buried in plain sight. I looked around. Everyone was distracted. Someone had just dropped cake, and the band was tuning up again. I flipped the lid open carefully, pressing my finger against the hinge so it wouldn't snap. The Rolex lay inside like it was posing for a photograph, but tucked into the lid, so thin it was almost invisible, was a folded slip of paper. A receipt. I slid it free. The paper felt waxy, handled too many times. Not from Oak and Hearth, a private courier service, dated 2 days before the party. Delivery address, Dana Whitmore. Billing name, Harold L. And then, scrawled in a note box. Make sure the back says it exactly like I typed. No mistakes this time. No mistakes this time, which meant there had been a last time. I folded it slowly, feeling the paper warm under my fingers. Then I slipped it into my clutch next to my phone. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears, but the rest of me felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that only comes when there's no more room for denial. The engraving wasn't a joke. It was a callback, a memory between them, a language I was never meant to understand, And I had been the punchline. The party moved around me like a film on mute. Waiters cleared glasses. Someone laughed too loud. The sound of clinking cutlery rose and fell like waves, but all I could hear was the echo of that note. No mistakes this time. By the time I stepped outside into the parking lot, the night air felt cold enough to sting. I stood beside our car for a while, pretending to check my purse, watching through the tinted windows as Harold said his goodbyes. Dana hugged him. Too long, too familiar. He didn't pull away, and that was the last time I mistook his stillness for loyalty. That night, after the party, Harold collapsed into bed like nothing had happened. His tie lay twisted on the floor, his cufflinks scattered near the dresser. He smelled like champagne, and something sweeter, floral, synthetic. Dana's perfume. I didn't crawl in beside him. Instead, I sat in the guest room, the one we used to call my reading space. It smelled faintly of old paper and lavender detergent. The lamp cast a small yellow circle across the desk. I set down my clutch, pulled out the folded receipt, and laid it flat beside my laptop. The ink shimmered faintly where his name was printed. Harold's name. Dana's address. My engraving. The triangle of it was almost poetic. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the old reading glasses I hadn't worn in months. They pinched slightly against my temples, but I needed to see. I opened our joint bank statements, the paper ones I still requested even though Harold said I was old-fashioned. Each line told a story, and somewhere between the office supply orders and the recurring utilities, I started finding him. Lunches that never appeared on his calendar, Uber receipts from midday to places with no meetings scheduled, boutique charges labeled client gifts, always small enough to blend in, to hide, the rhythm of betrayal disguised as routine. I turned to his laptop. He never changed his passwords. He didn't need to. He assumed I wouldn't look. He assumed I was still the woman who apologized when he got defensive. The keys clicked under my fingers, each letter a small act of rebellion. And then there it was, his inbox. I scrolled. Hundreds of messages. Some about clients, contracts, deadlines. Most were from her. Emails with subject lines that looked professional but felt wrong. Follow-up. Urgent. Quick question. Before Monday, you left this at the office. I opened one at random. A photo of a pen. His pen. The one I'd given him years ago with a tiny engraving that said, "To my forever partner." Beneath it, her message. "You forgot this, Mr. Forever." My stomach turned. I kept scrolling. There were attachments, photos of conference dinners, late nights in the office, snapshots of files, then selfies of her reflection in his window. And finally, one that made my breath catch. A photo. Dana in a hotel room, holding the same Rolex, her thumb resting on the engraving as though claiming it. The caption read, "Hope she likes it. 6 months old." I sat back. The screen light reflected off my glasses. Everything else went still. It wasn't disbelief that kept me frozen. It was recognition. The realization that the clues had always been there. Subtle, small, deliberate. He'd used my name as a smokescreen. My name had been the wrapping paper around his lies. Property of Lorraine. Not a taunt, a hiding place. I closed the laptop. The click sounded final. My chest felt hollow, scraped clean. But beneath that emptiness, something was taking shape. Something steadier than grief. It started small. A curve at the corner of my mouth. A smile. Not because I found it funny, but because for the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath me shift towards something I could control. I looked at the folded receipt again, the courier note, the engraving, the evidence of his carelessness. He'd built his lie so neatly around my name, thinking it would keep him safe. He forgot that my name is also what would destroy him. That was the night I stopped being the wife who got humiliated at a party and started being the woman who was going to burn the whole illusion down. There's a certain hum offices have after midnight, the kind that makes you feel like the walls are listening. The air conditioning kicks louder, cycling through the vents with a hollow sigh. The exit signs glow that particular shade of chemical green, too harsh for tired eyes, too bright for the dark. Even the click of your own shoes sounds like trespassing. That night, I let myself into Harold's downtown office using the spare key card he'd long forgotten I still had. It beeped once, sharp and sterile. The security light turned green. Inside, the building felt like it was holding its breath. The reception desk sat empty, a single mug half full of pens beside a computer that still hummed faintly in sleep mode. A plastic fern drooped under fluorescent light that flickered every few seconds. The air smelled faintly of toner and lemon disinfectant, the scent of professionalism left overnight. I walked past the row of empty cubicles, each one like a frozen diorama of daytime lives, a forgotten cardigan here, a cracked coffee mug there. The hum of servers echoed from the IT room, steady and low, like a mechanical heartbeat. I knew exactly where I was going. Dana's office. Her name was still taped neatly beneath the frosted glass. D. Whitmore, Executive Assistant. The lettering was starting to peel, curling at the corners, like even the glue was tired of pretending she belonged there. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. She was the kind of person who believed rules bent for her. Inside, the air was colder, cleaner. A faint perfume still lingered. That same synthetic floral mix I'd smelled on Harold's collar the night of the party. Her desk was immaculate. A small framed photo of her with Harold at some company event, both holding champagne, both smiling. His hand was on her back, too low to be professional. I sat down in her chair. The leather sighed under my weight. Her computer was asleep, monitor pulsing faint blue. I typed Harold's login, his usual pattern. It worked on the first try. Of course it did. He used the same password for everything, the same arrogance that made him predictable. The desktop blinked awake, and there it was. I didn't even have to dig. The evidence was waiting like it wanted to be found. A folder right in plain sight, labeled Legacy. I double-clicked. Inside were a dozen PDFs, expense reports, hotel invoices, dinner receipts, credit card authorizations with forged initials. One file near the bottom was titled Final Gift Approval. I opened it. The Rolex's make and serial number filled the header, followed by a line item, engraving. As specified, use wife's name. My eyes tracked to the bottom, and there, in neat corporate print, was the footer. Billed under Client Retention, Executive Discretion Fund, meaning the company paid for it, or thought they had. That wasn't a gift from Dana, it was a business expense. Fraud. The kind of thing that doesn't just end a career. It buries reputations, whole departments. I downloaded everything. Each click of the mouse sounded like a tiny, perfect nail being driven into something that deserved to end. Then I took a screenshot of the desktop, timestamp visible, folder names intact. I wanted the date, the proof that this wasn't a recent cleanup. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They weren't careful because they thought I'd never look. I should have been furious, but instead, I felt calm. Utterly calm, like the air before lightning splits a tree in half, like the single breath you take before saying something you can't take back. The quiet hum of the office surrounded me. I could hear the faint hum of the vending machine down the hall, the buzz of electricity in the ceiling. Somewhere a clock ticked too loudly, and in that sterile silence, I knew the game had already shifted. The next day, I drove 3 towns over to see someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Carla. She used to be Dana's friend. Back before Dana traded friendships for promotions. The community college where she worked looked small and sun-faded, brick walls softened by ivy. The parking lot was half empty, lined with yellow leaves that crunched under my heels. I found her in the faculty cafe, sipping iced coffee through a paper straw. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, but her eyes hadn't changed, sharp, appraising, quietly amused. When she saw me, she didn't even blink. "Took you long enough," she said. Her voice carried that dry, Tennessee humor that could cut glass. "You knew?" I asked. She stirred her coffee, the ice clinking softly. "She bragged about the engraving 2 months ago," Carla said. "Said it was the perfect kind of scandal, only funny if you were in on it." She took another sip, watching me carefully. "I thought you knew," she added. "I mean, everyone else did." Everyone else. The words landed heavier than I expected. That kind of betrayal, the collective silence of it, was its own cruelty. I managed a thin smile. "Did she ever send you anything?" Carla hesitated, then nodded. She unlocked her phone, scrolled for a few seconds, then turned it toward me. A photo filled the screen. Dana, sitting in Harold's office chair, her legs crossed, heels up on the desk. The watch gleamed on her wrist. The caption read, "Queen of the Castle, Lorraine who?" I stared at it for a long time. The audacity of it was almost art. "Can you send that to me?" I asked. She nodded. "You gonna use it?" "Oh," I said quietly, "you have no idea. That afternoon, the email hit my inbox. The picture, the timestamp, the proof. By Friday, I had more than screenshots. I had a story with receipts. So I reached out to HR, anonymously at first. Just a tip about budget misuse in the executive department. Then 2 days later, I made it official. My name, my voice, my evidence. I didn't need to raise my tone. I didn't need a scene. I had the truth. Detailed, time-stamped, undeniable. Dozens of falsified reports, expense reimbursements that lined their weekends, the engraving memo billed to the company, emails showing how she framed it as a morale initiative. Every document, every number was a domino waiting for the right nudge, and that watch, my name carved into it, was going to be the push. I scheduled a meeting with Eleanor, the head of HR. Eleanor was a quiet woman, the kind who missed nothing and said even less. She'd been with the company long enough to know the smell of corruption. When I stepped into her office, she closed the blinds without asking why. "I've been waiting for someone to say it," she said. I placed the folder on her desk. "Now I'm saying it," I told her, with proof. She opened the first page. Her expression didn't shift, but her eyes did. Small, sharp movements like a hawk tracing flight paths, expense report, invoice, email. Her pen tapped twice on the Rolex document. "This," she said, voice level, "was filed under client retention?" I nodded. "On a personal account?" I nodded again. She exhaled slowly, then closed the folder. "We'll need to open an audit," she said. I met her gaze. "I was hoping you'd say that." For the first time, she smiled. Not warmly, but with recognition. Not pity, respect. I left her office, the sound of my heels crisp and deliberate against the tile. Every step felt like punctuation. Outside, the sky was the color of dull silver. The air smelled like rain on warm asphalt, that electric scent that comes right before a storm breaks. I pulled out my phone and texted Carla one word: soon. That weekend, I started planting seeds, a conversation here, a casual comment there, at a mutual friend's dinner, over wine. Funny how much those retirement gifts cost, huh? To one of Harold's former coworkers in the grocery line, "Wonder who signs off on Rolexes these days?" And to an acquaintance who worked in accounting, "Hope no one used the wrong budget line. That'd be awkward." Each sentence was small, harmless on its own, but whispers have gravity. By Monday morning, they'd started to orbit. By Wednesday, they were spinning fast. And by Thursday, my phone buzzed with a company-wide memo someone had quietly forwarded to me. Mandatory attendance. Monday morning, HR compliance review and financial ethics presentation. No explanation, no context. But everyone would be there. Harold would sit in the front row as he always did, smiling, pretending, and Dana, she'd be there too. Hands folded, wrist bare, not knowing that every slide, every word, every number in that presentation would lead straight to her. To him. To the engraving that started it all. I looked at the memo on my phone, then out the window at the bruised sky. For the first time in months, I felt the calm that comes with inevitability. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. Dressed in dance, sharpened by patience. And by Monday, the storm would arrive. The conference room smelled like fresh toner and nervous cologne. That specific blend. Sharp, chemical, and faintly human. The scent of panic masked by professionalism. People trickled in slowly, shoulders hunched against the bright fluorescent lights. Most held travel mugs or half-eaten granola bars, shoes scuffed against industrial carpet. Someone laughed too loudly near the door, the brittle kind of laugh people use when they're already uneasy. They didn't know why they were really here, but I did. I sat near the back, one hand wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee I hadn't touched. The surface had cooled, a thin film gathering where steam used to be. My fingers pressed into the cup's ridged wall until the paper softened under my skin. The slideshow screen at the front glowed against the pale walls. The title slide read, Financial Ethics and Policy Updates, Q4 Compliance Review, and just below it, smaller print, presented by Human Resources. The air hummed with the sound of the projector's fan, every chair filled, project managers, junior staffers, senior executives shifting in tailored jackets. Even a few board members were dialed in on the wall monitor, little blue squares of authority, framed and flickering. I could see their faces, pixelated but attentive. Then, 10 minutes late, Harold walked in, laughing, With Dana, the laughter hit like static, too bright, too performative, cracking against the thick tension in the room. She wore a navy pencil skirt and a cream silk blouse that shimmered faintly under the lights. Her hair was slicked into a low knot, deliberate, restrained, like she'd dressed for court. A thin gold chain gleamed against her collarbone. Harold looked confident in that oblivious, executive way. A man who still believed he could talk his way through anything. He smoothed his tie, patted someone on the shoulder, and took a seat at the head of the table. She sat beside him, posture perfect. Neither of them looked at me. That was fine. I didn't need eye contact to watch them unravel. Eleanor, the head of HR, stood at the front of the room, remote in hand. Her blazer was slate gray, sharp-shouldered, wrinkle-free, the kind of woman who could slice through a lie without raising her voice. "Let's begin," she said. Her tone was even, not cold, not warm, just surgical. Slide 1 appeared. Company policy. She talked about compliance, accountability, and transparency. Slide 2. Expense protocol review. People nodded along, half listening, sipping coffee, the routine comfort of office procedure washing over them. Slide 3. Common violations and case studies. And that's when things changed, because case study A wasn't a hypothetical. It wasn't even subtle. The first image was a cropped expense report, names redacted, but the figures were clear. The audience leaned forward, murmurs rippling across the table. Slide 4 appeared, a close-up of a luxury receipt. The Rolex logo unmistakable, the words crisp under the overhead light. I heard a chair creak. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Then slide 5. Engraving detail. Property of Lorraine. My name. In bold, centered on the massive screen. The font was identical to the engraving I'd seen under the chandelier. The room shifted. You could feel it. Conversation stuttered mid-sentence. Someone coughed into their sleeve. Dana's posture tightened, spine rigid. Her smile vanished like a candle snuffed by a breeze. Harold's jaw worked once, his throat bobbing in a silent swallow. But Eleanor kept her rhythm. "In this case," she said evenly, "a personal item, a luxury timepiece, was purchased using funds intended for client engagement." Slide 6. A forwarded email thread. Names visible. Dana's name highlighted in yellow. Harold's initials below it. Slide 7. The photo. Dana. In Harold's chair, heels up on the desk, the watch glinting on her wrist. Caption. Queen of the Castle. A collective gasp swept through the room, the kind that fills the space between disbelief and recognition. Someone dropped their pen. The sound clattered, echoing too loudly. Eleanor didn't flinch. Further investigation, she continued, revealed forged approvals, miscategorized expenses, and a pattern of unauthorized disbursements. Slide 8. A chart. Clean, color-coded, merciless. Thousands of dollars in misused company funds. At the bottom, one line item burned brighter than the rest. Final gift. Rush engrave. Use wife's name. Dana's face drained to the color of printer paper. Harold's hand twitched as he reached for his water glass. The tremor was small, but everyone saw it. The silence in the room was thick. You could hear the faint hum of the lights, the whir of the projector, the scrape of someone's sleeve against fabric. "As of this morning," Eleanor said, "a formal audit has been initiated. Those involved will be contacted individually for statements." Dana's voice cracked through the stillness. "This is..." She stopped, swallowed. "This has to be a misunderstanding." Eleanor turned her gaze toward her, calm, absolute. "You'll have an opportunity to explain," she said. "In private." That single pause between words, "in private," carried more weight than shouting ever could. Dana sank back in her chair, her nails tapped against her folder, tiny staccato beats of panic. Harold didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone, just stared ahead, jaw locked, face frozen in corporate composure that was seconds away from shattering. The next slide faded in, a simple black background, white text. Transparency protects us all. No music, no voiceover, just silence. Not the kind that invites questions, the kind that buries them. When the projector clicked off, nobody moved. The air itself felt heavy, as though even oxygen didn't want to be there. Then, slowly, chairs began to scrape. One by one, people stood, avoiding each other's eyes, collecting notebooks they hadn't written in, murmuring half-hearted excuses. Need to check emails. Got a call. Wow, rough morning. The door opened and closed in steady rhythm until only a handful remained. Harold, still seated. Dana, standing too fast. Her chair toppled backward with a hollow thud. She didn't pick it up. Her purse was already in her hand. She pushed through the crowd, chin high, eyes glassy. The hallway swallowed her, and then it was just Harold and me. He didn't turn right away. He sat there for another moment, eyes on the dark screen, the reflection of that final message still faint in the glass. Finally, he stood, turned, and found me. His expression was a mix of fury and disbelief, like a man trying to wake from a nightmare he built himself. You did this, he said quietly. Not a question, a verdict. I held his gaze. No, I said. My voice didn't shake. You did. It was almost gentle. Because truth, when it finally lands, doesn't need volume. I walked past him. No eye contact, no smile, just the steady click of my heels against the linoleum floor. Behind me, I heard a chair slide, a breath catch, the sound of his entire world beginning to collapse under the weight of consequence. That sound, the slow unraveling of arrogance, was better than applause. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table. The light through the window was pale, flat, indifferent. I opened my laptop, typed out one final email. Recipient, the company's board. Attachments, every document, every screenshot, every timestamp thread. Subject line, supplemental evidence, unauthorized expenditures. I read it once, twice, then clicked send. No flourish, no explanation, just quiet satisfaction. I didn't ask for a thank you, didn't need one. The truth had already done what I couldn't. It had finished what it started. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were stalling for time. A low pulsing sound, too faint to be noticed unless you were sitting still long enough to feel it pressing against your thoughts. Across the table, Harold sat rigid in the same navy blazer he'd worn to his retirement party. Only now it didn't fit him right. His shoulders slumped forward. His tie was crooked, like he'd put it on in a hurry and lost interest halfway through. His hands gripped the armrests until his knuckles turned the color of paper. We were back in the same HR conference room, but the air had changed. No coffee cups this time, no polite laughter. Just a rectangular table, a stack of files, and the hum of the overhead light trying too hard to stay alive. A compliance officer sat across from us, a man with tired eyes and a voice that sounded like gravel being turned over in a shovel. His badge caught the light every time he moved his pen. Eleanor sat to my left, calm as always, her blazer still perfect, her pen poised above a legal pad. Beside her, a woman from legal. Younger, sharp features, crimson nails that tapped the tabletop every time Harold opened his mouth, like she could feel the lie forming before he spoke. They'd shown him everything, the expense reports, the receipts, the screenshots, and the photo. The one of Dana in his office chair, heels on the desk, my name glinting in the light from the watch. Dana hadn't returned to work. Rumor was she'd lawyered up. Her desk had been cleared out by security the same morning the audit was announced. Her framed photo, the one of her and Harold at the charity gala, was gone too. I hadn't spoken to him since the presentation. He'd tried to call once, left a voicemail that started with my name, cracked halfway through, and ended in static, like the sound of something short-circuiting. Now, seated 3 feet from me, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His jaw was rough with stubble. The lines around his mouth were deeper, heavier, as though the past week had aged him a decade. He stared at the folder in front of him, but didn't open it. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. It was just supposed to be funny. His voice was hoarse, low, almost pleading. The same tone he used to use when he forgot an anniversary. I looked at him. Funny to who? He didn't answer. The compliance officer cleared his throat, shifting the papers in front of him. Mr. Langford, he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. There's an option here. The board can pursue restitution and breach of ethics charges with full legal consequences. Or they can negotiate a separation package, contingent on a signed admission. The words restitution and legal consequences seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Harold blinked, twice. His mouth opened, then closed again. His eyes moved to me, glassy and searching. "What do you want, Lorraine?" My name sounded strange coming from him now, like it belonged to someone else. I took a breath, felt the edge of my composure steady inside me like a railing in a storm. "Truth," I said, "and for the company not to pay for your mess." The officer nodded once and made a note. The scratch of his pen was the only sound in the room. Eleanor watched Harold unreadable. He looked back at her, then down at his hands. His fingers were trembling now, tiny involuntary movements like his body was trying to release what his pride refused to. I stood slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the carpet. "I'm done here," I said. No anger, no tremor, just finality. The compliance officer gave a small nod. Eleanor didn't stop me. As I turned, I could feel Harold's eyes on me. Heavy, desperate, full of everything he hadn't said when it might have mattered. But I didn't look back. The hallway outside was empty, washed in sterile light. The floor was so polished it reflected the ceiling in dull fragments. Each step I took echoed softly. The sound of closure disguised as heels against linoleum. I passed the break room on my way out. Someone had pinned a new bulletin board near the coffee machine, cheerful, covered in pastel sticky notes. "Thank you, HR," one read. Another, "Finally cleaning house." A doodle of a broom and confetti sat in the corner. I stopped for a second, my reflection caught in the vending machine glass. My hair was pulled back, my expression calm. Then I smiled, not out of pettiness, out of clarity, because this was what truth looks like. Not loud, not triumphant, just still. Back home, the house was quiet. Too quiet, but not in a way that hurt anymore, just peaceful. I hung my coat by the door, slipped off my heels, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The tile was cool beneath my feet. The champagne bottle from the retirement party sat in the fridge door, unopened since that night. I pulled it out, wiped the dust from the label, and eased the cork loose with a muted pop. The sound was softer than I expected. I poured a glass, cold, crisp fizz rising like static in slow motion. The bubbles caught the light from the street lamps outside, scattering tiny reflections across the counter. And there it was, the watch, still in its velvet box, sitting exactly where I'd left it. I set my glass beside it and flipped the lid open. The silver gleamed under the kitchen light, smooth, polished, indifferent. For a long time, I just looked at it. The engraving was faintly smudged where I'd run my thumb over it too many times. Property of Lorraine. I traced the letters again. Once those words had burned, now they didn't. They were cold metal, an artifact, a reflection, not a declaration of love, not a joke, just a mirror of everything he thought he could hide behind my name. The irony of it almost made me laugh. He'd spent decades building a legacy on appearances. Neat shirts, polite smiles, a wife who smiled on cue, and in the end, the thing that destroyed him was his own vanity. His need to brand something that didn't belong to him. So I kept the watch. Not as a memento, as evidence of the lie, of the woman I used to be, the one who let apologies be promises, who mistook silence for peace, and the woman who replaced her, calm, deliberate, unflinching, the one who learned that sometimes justice doesn't need an audience. I lifted the watch from the box. It was heavier than I remembered, the cool metal pressed into my palm. I turned it over, pressed the tiny catch at the back, and opened the casing. The battery gleamed like a coin. With a steady hand, I removed it. The second hand froze mid-tick. I watched it stop. Perfect stillness, frozen in the exact moment they thought I'd stay quiet. The champagne fizzed beside me. I took a slow sip, the bubbles sharp against my tongue. Outside, the street was silent. Only the hum of a faraway streetlight and the whisper of the night breeze through the trees. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. No one clapped for me. No one toasted my strength. But I didn't need applause. I had my name, intact, untarnished, and the truth, complete, irreversible, unignorable. I set the watch back in its box, closed the lid gently, and left it there. A time capsule of arrogance, sealed and still. Then I lifted my glass to the window, to the faint reflection of a woman who had finally rewritten her own ending. And in that quiet, with the soft glow of the city lights on my face, I whispered what I'd been thinking all along. You don't need to destroy them loudly. You just have to outlast them. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.